Hi everyone. The lesson today is an introduction to ASP.NET Core 2.0, and the tools we're going to be using are Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio 2017. So let's get started. What is ASP.NET Core? Well, to understand what ASP.NET Core is, we should actually go and look at .NET Core itself, because ASP.NET Core is built on top of .NET Core. So if you want to know what version of .NET Core you've got, you can type in .NET. So if you want to know what version of .NET you've got, you can do .NET -- version, and it will tell you the version that you've got. Now, the version that we're going to be looking at today is 2.x. So this is pretty much the latest version of .NET Core as we speak. And there are new versions that come out every so often. If you want to get help on all the possible terminal commands that you can get out of .NET itself, you can go .NET -- help. And it will give you a variety of different commands that you can look at. So I'm going to show you a bunch of other important commands that you can use with the .NET command line utility. And there are way more than the ones I'm going to show you. But in the ASP.NET context, this is probably most of what we will be using. For example, I will start off by developing an application outside of Visual Studio 2017. And this is so that you get a sense that you can actually develop apps in any platform, not necessarily Windows. It could be the Mac, it could be Linux. And when you're working with another platform that doesn't have the full-blown Visual Studio 2017, you can do everything from the command line. And you can use a smart editor like Sublime, or in today's case, I'll be using Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code runs on all the platforms. So if you want to build a template for a new ASP.NET app, you would do something like this. You would do .NET new, and at this point you can say -- help if you're not sure of what templates are available. So if I do this, it comes up with this interesting list. And this is the list of templates that we have today. For example, if you want to create a class library, it would be class lib. If you just want to do a console app, it would be console. If you want to do an ASP.NET MVC app, you'd go .NET new MVC. And here there are some examples at the bottom. If you want to build an ASP.NET MVC app with individual user authentication, you go -- auth individual. If you want to do one that's a class library and you want to target a specific framework, in this case they're targeting 2.0, you do a command like this. Okay, and the last example is like doing just a help. If you just need help, you do that. Now, let's do a simple console application to get a sense of how this thing works. So, to start with, you'd probably want to create your app in a folder. So I will go to the folder where I want to build these apps. I will create another folder. So I'll call this command line. I created a folder in here. And at this point, I will go to the command prompt and do a bunch of command line .NET utility commands. .NET new -- help. This is what we did before. We want to do command line. So if I want to do command line, I just will do .NET new console. So if I go .NET new console, it will create for me a .NET app right here. And notice that it's saying running .NET restore. If you want to run this app, you have to restore the packages, you have to build, and you have to run. So if you look, if we make a dir here and see what we've got, we have a file .csproj, that's the project file. Then you have the obj folder, and then the program.cs is the main application. So let's go to the file system and have a look. So this is what we've got. So let's open program.cs in a text editor like Notepad++, and you'll see that this is a standard command line application. Now, if I come here and I delete the obj folder, okay, it's gone. I need to restore that. So the command for restoring the packages is .NET restore. So this is going to restore all the packages. Now if I go back to the file system and I look at the obj folder, it got restored. The next step is, if you want to run this application other than restoring packages, you probably need to build it. So to build the app from the command line, you can go .NET build. And it is building the command line application. And the next step is to run it. So if I look at the directory, I really don't have yet an executable. We can find out. We probably do have an executable, but it would be in the debug folder. Now the executable for this app, it is this DLL. So this here is my application. But notice, unlike in the .NET framework, when you compile an application that has a main method in the .NET framework, it will produce for you an exe extension app. This is not what happens in .NET Core. In .NET Core, it produces an application with an extension of DLL. Now, if I want to run this, I would come back to the command line at the root and I'd go .NET run. And now it's running. This app simply spits out hello world. So how did it run it? It actually ran the DLL that happens to be under the bin folder. Enough of this command line example. Let's see what we can do in terms of a web app. So going back to the web app, I'm going to copy from the previous example here. I want to create a web app with individual user authentication. So I'm going to copy this. So let's create a folder. So I'm going to say mkdir, and I'll call it ASP.NET Core. And I'll go to that folder. And then let's run this command here. So now we do have a full-blown web application that's been set up for us here. And you can see, let's go to the file system and have a look at what exactly we have in this folder. You can see, yeah, you've got a controllers folder, you have a models folder, you have a views folder, and this is probably new for those of you who didn't work with ASP.NET Core. We have a www root folder. There are some changes, but before we look at those changes, let's see how we can build this app. and run it. So you can see here that the packages have been restored already. So what we need to do now is let us just run it. So you can go .NET run. And when you do .NET run, if necessary, it will restore. And if necessary, it will build. It does all that stuff if it hasn't happened already. And then it's going to come up with a message saying it's listening on localhost 5000. So when you're running a web app, it launches a web server. And the web server that's being used here is not IIS. Microsoft created a new web server, they call it Kestrel. And this Kestrel web server, it's a cross-platform web server that runs on all the platforms. And that was the main reason they came up with a new web server. So if we want to check this out, we can open our browser and go to localhost 5000. Let's register a user. Since there is this button, we might as well see what happens. And sure enough, a user has been registered. We can log out and log in as that user. And everything works. So now that our web server is running, let's open this application in Visual Studio Code. Now, I'll tell you of two ways you can run this application in Visual Studio Code. The first way of doing it is in the command line at the root location of your web app, you can just type in code dot. And it should open up. And here you get to see all your folders and all your files and everything. So another way of opening up this project in Visual Studio Code is to go to the parent directory, right-click on that folder, and in Windows, you get this option, Open with Code. And you can just click on that, and it will open up in Visual Studio Code. Also, in Visual Studio Code, you can run this in a debug mode if you want to. You can click on this bug here, and this will run in debug mode. So after you click that, you can click on the debug button here, the green button, and this will run in debug mode. Now, what debug mode allows you to do is you can inspect your variables, you can put a breakpoint and all that stuff. Now, when you run it, it will also open up in the Kestrel web server. But it takes a little bit longer because it's adding debug information. So you get this message at the end that it's listening on port 5000, and it opens up for you the page in your browser, in your default browser. And there you go, same thing. Now, if you don't want to run in debug mode, well, in this case, I'm going to stop the debugger. And if you don't want to run in debug mode, what you can do is you can go into a terminal window, or you can hit a very useful command in Visual Studio Code, and that is, I'll open it up in Notepad. Good command to know is control backtrack. The backtrack looks like a apostrophe at an angle. If you do control backtrack, it opens up the terminal window. You see, you get a PowerShell window inside of Visual Studio Code. And in here, if I want to, I can go .net run. This will run outside of the debug mode. But here again, we can go to localhost 5000 and it will be running. So lesson learned here is that if you do control backtack, you can get it on terminal window while you're in Visual Studio Code. Now let's have a peek at what files we've got here. So we have a file here called appdb. What is this file? Well, because we created our application from the command line, the ASP.NET Core assumed that you're working from a non-Windows platform. Even though we happen to be in Windows, you could have executed this command on a Linux box or on Mac. And it's assumed that on these platforms you don't have SQL Server. So the database that's being used here is SQLite. Let's have a peek at the data. I have installed a SQLite Studio app. I'm going to open up SQLite Studio, which is down here. Let's open up this database that I just found. I'm going to say add a database, and I'll navigate to this folder here, this folder. I'm going to copy this and go in here. Navigate to this folder. And in here, I'll open up this app.db. When I open app.db, you can see that there are some tables in here. And these are the tables that were created when I added a new user. So if I click on ASP.NET Users and I hit the Data tab here, you can see the data that's being stored in that database. And this is the user that I created. Now, there are a lot of these applications that enable you to look at SQLite data. And this is just one of them. Now let's get back to that app. So we discovered that the database is SQLite. Now the other differences between this and the ASP.NET MVC5, which uses the full-blown .NET framework, is that there are a lot of the configuration files that happen to be JSON-based. For example, we've got this one here called appsettings.json. And this is the equivalent of the web.config. You will see that here's my connection string to the database. This is where it specifies the name of the database. And you can see that the name of the database here is actually app.db. So any kind of configuration settings you want to do, you need to put it into this app settings. The other important file is this ASP.NET Core CS project. Now this is not a JSON-based file. This is an XML-based file, and it contains the artifacts that make up your project. So if I open this, you will see here that you have a list of the packages that are needed by this application. So these are 3 packages that are used by this application. We also have a program.cs, and this program.cs, it's got the main entry point into your application. It's got the main method. So every time your application runs, the first app that runs is really this program.cs. Gets compiled and the main method runs. You also have startup.cs. And startup.cs, it has 2 important methods. They are configure services, where you register the service that you're going to be using, and then configure is where you actually say, I want to use a particular capability in that service. So these two methods are very, very important. The other thing that's worth noting is that we have this new folder called www.root. And what lives in that folder are all the static artifacts. Anything that happens to be static. And as you can see here, you've got the CSS folder, your images, your JavaScript, maybe some libraries, and your fav icon. If I have a static page that I want to create, for example, I want to create a new file, and I want to call it, say, show.html. I would put it in here. Now, there is a nice shortcut for creating a new web page. You just do exclamation and tab. It will use emit to create for you a standard HTML page. And here, for example, I might want to say H2, and I'll say this is my show.html page. Now, if I go to my browser and I try to serve this page, let's see. So if I go here, localhost, and I specifically target this page, it should show me that page. So any static artifact you have to stick it into the www.root folder. So we created an application on the command line. If you want, you can take this application and open it up in Visual Studio. And the very easy way of doing that is just go to the command line. So let's go here. This is where our app is. I'll go to the command line at this point, and I can just request the actual CSproj name. So if I just hit enter on this particular name, which is the CSproj name, it will open up in Visual Studio. And we should be able to change things and run it and compile it and all that stuff. So what you do in the command line terminal using the .NET utility is 100% compatible with Visual Studio. Because if you created this app in Visual Studio, you can also edit it in Visual Studio Code, which brings up an interesting concept. If you're working as a team on a project and somebody built the template or the skeleton in Visual Studio 2017, and there's another member of the team that's working on a Mac, they can push that into source control, and each person can work in their own environment, whether it's on a Mac or Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or Sublime and so on, and they can all work together as a successful team, and there shouldn't be any problems. So if we want to make a change here, for example, I'll go to Views, let's say Home, and go to my index page, and let me get rid of all this stuff that's on the index page. Let me keep it plain. Okay, so we just have nothing there, I guess. And if I run this using Control F5, which means not in debug mode, this will probably run in IIS because we're running it from Visual Studio. And there it is. It's running, but As you can see at the bottom here, this is running under IIS. Now, if I want to run it in Visual Studio under the Kestrel web server, I can do that by clicking on this drop down here and choosing ASP.NET Core. This option allows you to run the web app outside of IIS and under the Kestrel web server. And there you go. You get this terminal window, which basically tells you how this thing is running. And in this particular case, unlike when we run it from Visual Studio Code, it's listening on port 50672 and not port 5000. I'm going to close everything and start a new project. And the project I'm going to start is what I call a minimal ASP.NET app. Why do I call it minimal? Now, ASP.NET Core was inspired by Node. Node came before ASP.NET Core, and the success of Node somehow influenced the folks at Microsoft to come up with a faster web platform than the platform that they had before. Going back to Node, the reason why Node is fast is because Node, when you first start your Node application, it doesn't have any capabilities. You add the capabilities as you need them. And the end result of that is that a Node application doesn't carry too much baggage, in the sense that it doesn't load, for example, a DLL or some sort of extension that has too many capabilities, of which maybe you use 5 or 10%. And this is what happens with ASP.NET. With ASP.NET, there is a DLL called system.web. And that system.web is a humongous file that every time there's a request, that entire DLL has to load into memory. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start by creating a minimal ASP.NET app. And you will see that at the very beginning, there's barely anything. It can't even load a static page. And as we need things, we add them. And this is very much like when you go to a restaurant and you order food a la carte. Basically, order what you like, as opposed to going to a buffet and you start getting greedy and you get bloated by the time you leave the restaurant. So let's get started. I'm going to open up Visual Studio 2017, and this time I'm going to create my project inside of Visual Studio, and it's going to be a .NET Core 2.0. So I'm going to go File, New, Project, and I'll choose this time ASP.NET Core Web Application. Now, I can pick whichever .NET framework I want. But the idea here is I don't really care about .NET framework. I'm more interested in .NET Core. I'll save this in a folder. I'm going to call this application Minimal ASP.NET Core. You can call it whatever you like. I'll click on OK. Now on the next dialog, here you can choose a bunch of options regarding .NET Core. And the second drop-down list gives you a drop-down with the various versions of the .NET Core that you can choose from. Let's look at this first drop-down list. Now, this drop-down list, you get a choice between .NET Core and .NET Framework. If you use .NET Framework, it means that you're going to create an app that works on both frameworks, on the .NET Core and the .NET Framework. Now, how does that work? Well, only the packages that happen to work in both, those are the ones that get selected. I want to have a pure .NET Core application, so I'm going to choose this one. Now, let's have a look at the options we have for the .NET Core versions. And these all depend on what you've got on your machine. And on my machine, I happen to have .NET Core 2.0 and 1.1, but I want to stick to 2.0. I will choose empty. I want to create a bare bones application. And I don't even have the choice to choose authentication, because it being empty, it is bare bones, it doesn't have that capability. The one thing that you might see at the bottom here is the ability to enable Docker support. Now, Docker support really requires you to have Docker installed on your machine. I have Docker on my machine, but I'm not going to do this at the moment. You can see that there aren't that many files here. We have the www root, and essentially we've got two files. We have the program.cs and startup.cs. But before we run it, let's have a peek at startup.cs and see what's in there. And you can see here that this is going to simply send a response with a string hello world. Let's run it. And sure enough, you get your hello world. This isn't really useful to us. So I'm going to comment this out. What I want to do now is I want to create a model of a product entity. So to do that, I will need to have a folder called models. And in this folder, I will add a product entity. I've got a snippet for that. It's just a plain and simple product entity. Right click here, add class, product.cs. So there you go. I've got my product entity. Now my plan is to build an ASP.NET MVC app here. But this current state of this app being really, really bare bones, it's incapable of doing for me an ASP.NET MVC app. What I need to do is add the services that I need. So in this configure services method in the startup.cs, I have to indicate my intent that I want to use MVC. So what you do here is you type in services, which is this object that's being passed as an argument, services dot add MVC. Here I'm saying I need to add MVC. Now down here, I will indicate that the fact that I want to indeed use MVC. So I can say use MVC with default route. What is default route? It is the rules that we're accustomed to when we were using ASP.NET MVC5, which really means that you have slash the controller name, slash the action method name, slash an optional ID. This encapsulates all those rules into this. We have our models and we have a product entity in there. Let's create some dummy data. So I'm going to add another class and I'm just going to call it dummy data. And I've got a snippet for that. So in this snippet, I'm creating about 4 products and returning these 4 products when the getProducts method is being called. So close this. Now let's create a home controller. We need for a home controller to have a controllers folder. So I'm going to add a new folder and I'll call it the controllers folder. This is really the convention. And while we're at it, we might as well create a views folder too. Now, for my controllers folder, I'm going to have a home controller. So I'm going to create here a controller. So I can say add controller and I'll add an empty controller. And I'll call this the home controller. And I have a snippet for the contents of the home controller. So this is what my home controller is going to look like. I'm going to copy this and replace this home controller with this code. What this home controller is going to do is it's going to return the list of products that I have. So I need to resolve this. There goes. Now, we know that we need to have a view for this home controller. But before we do the view for the home controller, let's create a layout. So under views, let's add a new folder and let's call it shared. And in that shared folder, I'm going to create a layout file. I'm going to go add view. And I'm going to call this the basic layout. And I'll create it as a partial view. The reason I'm saying partial view is because I really want it to create for me as empty a file as possible. Let's go add. I have a snippet for this. You see, it created for me this file called basic layout. I'm going to replace the content of this file with this markup. And let's have a peek at the markup. The markup basically references Bootstrap version 4, and I'm also using some JavaScript libraries that are needed for Bootstrap. And I have only one div tag here with class container, and the reason I have class container is because I want to use Bootstrap. And then you've got this render body, which is the entry point for your views. So enough of this, so we can close it. Now the next thing I need is an index.cs HTML that's supposed to be living under views, and I need to create another folder here called home. And under home, I need to create the index view. I'm going to ask for a new view, which I'll call it index. And let this be a regular view. And I'm going to choose the layout page that I wanted to use. I can click on this here and navigate to my layout. And my layout is under shared, so I'm going to say yes, this is the layout it needs to use. And let me go and get a snippet for that. So for this, I will just copy the rest of this. Stick it in here. Now if you come back to this line here, view data title equals index, this is equivalent to doing this, view bag dot title equals to index. These are pretty much the same. So if you like, you can comment this out and use the other way of adding text to a dictionary. Now let's look at this index view. Let me delete this line because it's duplicated. We have a table and it's using a Bootstrap table that's going to be striped. And I want here to display my products. I have some static data. And the products have these columns, name, description, price, and category. But in addition to that, there's a product ID that I really don't need to display. And I'm going to iterate through the model. Now, where's the model coming from? There's one line that's missing, and it's in my snippet. I need to tell it what kind of concrete class to expect. So I should add this to the very top. And what's going to come through is a product object. There seems to be a problem with this name, and I'll copy it from my model's product. And I'm going to take this one and replace it with that name. And that should be good. Now, let's run this and see if it's working. And it is working. Now, let's go back to the code and have a look at what this link looks like. So we have actually a link here that's displaying the item name, and the URL of that link goes to home, display, item product ID. So if we go to the web page here and we hover over these, we'll see that they point an action method called display that I haven't even created. So let's create that action method in my controller and create another action method. Okay, so we're receiving here an argument ID, and we're checking whether that ID is greater than 0 and less than the size of this product array. And if it is, then we're going to return the product for the ID that's being requested, of course. And then if we can't find the product, we're going to send a not found. And a not found really means that you're going to send an HTTP status 404. Now, we need a display view for this. So I need to create under home a view called display. Add view, and I'll call it display. and it's going to use the same layout. And I've got a snippet for that. This. And get rid of one of these display lines. And I'll go back to my snippet and take this concrete class, which probably needs to be adjusted. And I know there's something wrong with this name. We'll copy it from here and restore it down here. Now if we run this app now, let's see if it's working. If I click on pencil, I do see my pencil. So the display is working okay. Now, if you want to specify a default layout page, there's a place where you can specify that. So under views, you can add a special kind of page, and it's called the view start.cshtml. So you can say view, add new item. I'll filter on view, start page, and you get this one here. So this is the name of that file, and you cannot change it. Do not change it. Accept it as it is. And this one ends up in the views folder. And here you go. So what you do here is you specify your default layout page. And in our case, our default layout page is this. Basic layout. By doing that, let's see if we go now to any of our views, and let's say I comment this out. Let's see if we pick up the default layout. Go back here, refresh this, now it works. Now let's also delete it from the display view. So in the display view, you don't really need to specify the layout if you have a default layout page. So now if I refresh again and I go to pencil, it will pick up the default layout. Let's do another simple change. And that is to emphasize and to prove to you that we have a really bare bones application that doesn't even need to know how to serve a static page or any static artifact for that matter. Let's go into the layout page. And in my layout page, there are some static files that we're loading from the internet. I'm going to comment all of these out. Okay? And I want to load these static pages, the Bootstrap, the JavaScript, and all that. I want to load them locally. Now I want to install Bootstrap. I don't have Bootstrap at the moment. So where do I get Bootstrap from, and how do I install it? Now there is a package called Bower. And Bower is used to install client-side libraries. And by client-side libraries, I mean things like Angular, things like React, things like Bootstrap, and all that stuff. And this is the standard. In the previous version of the ASP.NET, you could install these using NPM. But now there's a distinction between what NPM does and what Bower does. NPM installs server-side packages. Bower installs your client-side. So if you want to install Bootstrap to Bower, you need to add a file called bower.json. And you can do that by adding a new item. Yeah, I'm going to go to Web, General, and this is what I'm looking for, Bower configuration file. I'm going to choose this. And again, do not change this name. It has to be kept as bower.json. I'm going to add this. And this goes into the root of your web application. Here it is. Right at the root. At this level. And you have this collection called dependencies. And these are the things you want to install. In my case, I want to install Bootstrap. And the version I'm looking for is 4.0.0. As soon as I save this, Visual Studio is looking at this file. And the moment it changes, it goes off and gets those libraries automatically. So here I am, I'm saving, and then you will see something is happening in here. It's going off and getting Bootstrap for me. And it's going to put it under the www root folder, because that's where all these static artifacts go to. And you can see here, you can see that it's actually putting it in this folder. And it's already happening. There it is, Bootstrap. The files that I need to put them in my layout file, right? Because I commented these out. And I need to go to lib, bootstrap, dist. These are distribution files. And I have the CSS. Probably I need bootstrap.css, which I'm going to drag and drop and put here. And I need the JavaScript, bootstrap.js. So I'm going to drag and drop this one here. And there we go. These two files I need. These are the most basic files that I need. So now, let us run this and see if it picks up Bootstrap. So let me come here, go to my home page, and darn, I've lost all the styling. The Bootstrap styling is gone. And the problem is, so our styling is not picking up. And the problem here is that unless you configure ASP.NET Core to serve static pages, it's not going to do it for you. We need to add a library or a package to do this. We can do that from the package manager in Visual Studio. Since we're in Visual Studio, package manager still works in Visual Studio. So I'm going to show you how you would install it in Visual Studio using package manager, or how you would do it from the command line if you're on a Mac. You don't have Visual Studio. So here's our package manager. So here I can say install package, and I need Microsoft dot ASP.NET Core dot static files. And there you go, it's bringing this package. Now, if I was doing this from, say, on a Mac, and I want to do it from the command line, I would do something different. So let me go to a command line at this level. Command line for that is you have to do it at the level where you have your project file. So I would say .NET add package, and it would be this package. So instead of typing it in, I'm just going to copy it. Copy and paste it here. So this pretty much should do the same thing. I want to show you that if you want to edit the actual CS proj file, this is the main project file. You can come here and open up the project file inside of Visual Studio. We saw how you can add a package from within Visual Studio using the package manager. We saw how you can do that in the command line. And there's a third way. If you come here and you edit this file and you save it, it will also install for you that package. So now, what have we done? We added a package that is supposed to serve static pages. The next step is we should go into the configure method in your startup.cs and tell ASP.NET that you want to use static files. And there you go. This command allows you to actually use static files. Prior to that, you don't get that luxury. So now I'm compiling, and if I come here and I refresh, and there you go, it works. Now, let's look at something else. Suppose I would get an exception for some reason. Let's throw an exception purposely and see what's going to happen. So if I come in here, and let's say on the home controller display method, let me throw an exception and see what's going to happen. Okay, so now let's see what's going to happen here. Come here. If I click on pencil, you get an exception. So this shows you some information about what might be going wrong. And that is because go to the startup.cs. See here, it says that if the environment is development, then it will use this developer exception page. Now, if I did not have this, you wouldn't get that detailed exception. Let's see. We comment this out, and if we throw that exception, you won't get detailed information. So this is interesting because you really want to see these kinds of exceptions if you're in development phase. If you're in production, you want to see that. So let's go back, refresh here. And then let's click on pencil, and then you don't get detailed information about what went wrong. So let's restore this to back to what it was. I'm going to uncomment this, Let me get rid of the exception here. The next thing I want to discuss is what we call browser link. Now, browser link allows a developer to make changes to the view and quickly test them out with a multitude of browsers. You want to make sure that any change that you make doesn't break in Firefox and doesn't break in Opera, Chrome, Edge, and that sort of thing. So you don't really want to open up all these browsers. You want to refresh inside of Visual Studio and have all these browsers automatically refreshed with any changes that you make. So the first step, if you want to use browser link, is to click on this here. And inside Visual Studio, you want to enable browser link. And inside of your startup, you want to say that you want to use browser link, app.use browser link. Now, if you run the application, let's run our app after doing these two changes. Your app should run just as before, but if you go and look at your page source, you'll see at the bottom Visual Studio has injected for you some stuff here. This JavaScript that is injected allows Visual Studio to control your browsers using WebSockets. So let's check something. Let me close this, and in the view, in my home index view, right before the table, I'm going to just display something. So now, if I come under this and I say refresh linked browsers, it will refresh that browser without me having to go to that browser and refreshing it specifically. So here I am, and then you see the browser has been refreshed. That's not a big deal when you're dealing with one browser. But suppose you have multiple browsers. So let's actually engage multiple browsers. Back in Visual Studio, under here, you can choose Browse With. And you get this. I can do a multiple selection here. I want to browse with Firefox, Microsoft Edge, and Opera. Open up all these browsers and see what my page looks like on all of them. So I'm going to click on Browse here. And hopefully it will open up all of these. And it's because I said Chrome, it's opening up another instance of Chrome. So here you go. So here's my Opera. Here is my Firefox, which is still loading. And here's my Edge. And here's my Chrome. Let me make a small change in Visual Studio. So what I'll do is I will put a couple of stars here and put a couple of stars here. I'll save and then come and say under here, refresh linked browsers. So if I go to Chrome, I get my stars here. I go to Edge, I get my stars there. I go to Chrome Edge, what else is there? Opera. And then Firefox, all of them, they update. So this is good for a developer to work with all these browsers and make sure that everything works. How about minification? If we want to minify our files, minification also doesn't come packaged unless you request it. It doesn't come as far as without you requesting it. So let's add something that requires minification here. So under my www root, I'm going to create a folder here. Let me call it CSS. And under CSS, I'm going to create my own CSS file. Add new item. And then I guess I can ask for a style file here, style sheet file, and I'll call it style1, for example, style1.css. And in style1, let me change the color to, say, green. Okay? And I'm going to copy this and paste it here. And then call this style2. And style2, let's also add something that's different. Let me just say, for example, the background is something. Background is, let's say, wheat. Okay. Now, in my main page, I can drag and drop these two, and I'll get a different background color, different foreground color, and I'll add that to my layout. So over here, let's come and take these two, put them here. So I get these two. So let's run this and see what it looks like. I can come here and say refresh linked browsers, and it should all work. Yeah, there you go. It works. But the point I'm trying to make is not so much about the linked browsers. I want to sort of minify this, show you how it's minified. So if I want to do minification, I need to come inside of Visual Studio and add an extension. So I'll come here and add an extension. You go to Tools, Extensions and Updates, and then choose Online, and in the filter here, search for Bundler. Bundler. And then you get Bundler and Minifier. You want to install this extension. And I already have it. So I don't really need it. I did that before. But in your case, you probably have a button that says install. Go ahead and install it. After you install it, you need to restart your Visual Studio. Otherwise, it won't take. So now we want to minify these two. So we can right-click here. When you install that extension, you get this option here, Bundler and Minifier. So bundling is to put multiple files together, fusing multiple files of the same type into one file. In other words, take all your CSS files and instead of having 5 of them, create one. That's bundling. Minifying is look into the content and make the content as small as possible. So we want to bundle and minify these two. So it asks you, okay, what name do you want the CSS file to be? And I'm going to say, okay, bundle.css is fine by me. So it's going to take these two and bundle them into a file called bundle.css. And there it is. So if you open this, it put it both together. It bundled it. The reason this didn't get minified is because when you build your application in release mode, here, that's when it gets minified. But so long as you're debugging, it doesn't do minification. In any case, let us go back to our layout and let's replace this with the bundled version. And of course, there's no reason why it won't work. It will work. Let's go back and refresh these pages here. And sure enough, it works. Now, one last thing that I would like to do before we end this recording is to deploy our ASP.NET app that we created in the terminal window to Azure. And a reminder that that application uses SQLite. So we start off by going to Azure. So in Azure, I'm going to create a new web app. I'm going to go add, choose web app, a plain, simple web app. In here, I shall create, and I'll call it my ASP.NET Core app. My ASP.NET Core app, and let's click on create. So here's my ASP.NET Core app, and I want to deploy using Git. I'm going to go to deployment options here and choose Git local Git repository, this one, and click on OK. So the end result of that is that I will have a Git endpoint here. This. I'm going to copy this. And I'll put it into Notepad for the moment. Now the next thing is, let's go to our app. So first thing is, I want to initialize my Git repository. So I'll go Git init, and I'll say Git add everything, Git commit, Now, the next thing is to create a remote repository. So I'll go git remote add, and I'll call that AZ, and I have the endpoint in Notepad here. So I'm going to copy this, copy, paste this. So I have an endpoint. Now let me push the code into Azure. And now it's done. Let's just go and see if it is working. So I'm going to paste the URL of my new site, which is this here, and see if it's going to work. And it works. Let's see whether our database works, because that's the most important. Now, I did create a user previously. Let me see if I can log in with that username. And yes, I can log in. Let me log out and register another user. And that's registered too. So your application has read-write access to that file on the file system on the server, and the act of deploying this app to Azure was pretty painless. You didn't have to do anything to the database. The database is sitting there on the file system and you can use it, no problem there. Okay? And that ends my lesson today, and I hope to see you in future lessons. Bye.